Good afternoon. Welcome back to the second day of the third International Conference of What If World History. And today we have the great pleasure of having two keynote speakers. Professor Pedro Graça, who is Director of the Faculty of Nutrition and Food Science of the University of Porto. And he will be addressing what if the potato had not been introduced in Europe, or how can a particular food change history. And we also have the honor of having a great writer of speculative fiction, Inês Montenegro, who alongside, I'm really sorry, alongside being a writer, is also an anthologist, a translator and a publisher, and she will be addressing what if the Estado Novo regime would have persisted in rejecting the apparitions of the Holy Mary in Fátima as it initially did.
Good afternoon. We will speak in English and make this presentation this way so that everyone can understand it. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm a nutritionist, and I'm not a person from history field, and I'm not used to this type of yes. Sorry. Well, the micro is on. I think you hear me better, the better way. So I was saying, you don't see the slides. I thought. They are visible. Okay, that's great. I was saying that I'm not a person from history field, so I will try to do my best. Well, we will talk about potato. Potato is a staple food. It's a food that we have nowadays in our dishes as a normal food, everyday food. But this didn't happen in the past. Not only potato, but a lot of foods that we think that have been here with us for a long time, but they have not. Not only potato, but other foods like tomato, that we think that tomatoes are here in pizza from Roman times, but they just arrived in Europe in the 18th century, 7th, 18th century. So there are a lot of foods like that. Potato is a common food, is a staple food, but in the Andean mountains in Central America and South America, especially South America. We believe that this type of food was a common food for many centuries ago, and today we think that we started to domesticate the first potatoes near Lake Titicaca 8,000 years ago. It's a lake that is one part in Bolivia, another part in Peru. It's a lake that is almost 3,080 meters up above sea level. But potato has a problem, and that's why we needed to domesticate potato. Potato, there are many types of potato, and many of them are bitter, and are not suited for be eaten. Many wild potatoes contain some compounds that are toxic for humans. So what these people have done during I believe, many, many centuries, was trying to identify those that were less bitter and those that were more indicated for human consumption. And because this type of substances, glycoalkaloids, are good for the plants because they are resistant to insects, so insects don't attack these plants, but at the same time, they could create, they could be poison to human beings. There are some ways of trying to do that. One is just to choose potatoes that are less bitter and are more comestible, if I can say that. Another way to do that was to use the nature and try to freeze and dry this type of potatoes, because if you freeze and dry during many times, after all, the potato will lose these substances. And one way to do that is to smash them with your hands or your teeth or with your feet, and to remove the peel of the tomato and then freeze and dry again during some days. When you do that several times, potato becomes more comestible, and this is a way of preserve. Since in these areas there are big amplitudes of temperature, after doing that during some time, this freeze-dried potato product can last then for decades, because it lost part of the water, and when the fruit lose their water, it can be preserved during much more time. It looks like stones because it lost all the water, and it's very common still today. If you drive across Bolivia or across Peru, you'll find this type of fruits. I've been there in May, so I have some pictures that were taken in Peru across the border. The next one is not mine, but it represents these dried potatoes that it's called el chuño. It's a preserved potato that you still can find and eat in these places. Sometimes it is cut in small portions to look more like grains, and you can use this in your food. It's now industrialized, and you can eat chicken with that. I have here this was one of my meals. This is chicken, and here you can see the potato dried in small portions, and it's very, very good. This is the chicken that we don't taste here anymore. It's like an old chicken. It's a chicken, it's not a farm chicken, and it's much bigger than a normal chicken because it's here in Europe would be organic or something like that. I don't know, but would be a different chicken. You can see also this work of art. I think it's a work of art in the mountains to plant potatoes, because the place is it's like our vineyards in Douro, but it's dedicated to the plantation of potatoes in the Andes, in the high altitude. Well, the Spanish, when arrived here, they detected that people eat this type of potatoes. And they noticed that it was the staple, the basics of energy provider for these men. They work very, very hard because this is a high altitude and there is mountains everywhere. And the Incas have the idea that men should always walk on the top of the mountains. So all the roads in the Inca Empire is not down, but it's up. So that the higher places of the mountain is where you have the roads. And imagine to cross a continent always on the top of the mountain. So you need lots of energy, very digestible energy, because this is a most important thing of a carbohydrate is to be very high digestible. So this should be very digestible. And on the other side, should be available everywhere. And they have small compounds of small houses where you have always el chuño, so that when you stop, you have food to eat. So this was along the empire, and there are all of the places. Of course, the Spanish, when arrived, they conquered very easily this empire because they have good roads and they have food every X kilometers. And they bring the disease. So they bring the disease, they have food, and they have roads. That's how a small portion of people conquered a big empire. That's what the historians say. I believe it's true. Well, although the Spanish recognized the importance of this food, and they brought this to Spain, some say via Chile and Canary Islands. It's an hypothesis, but it arrived soon in Europe. But it spread across Europe very fast, because all the foods, all the things that arrived spread. But the case of potato, as tomato, for example, it stayed with botanic people and only special people. Didn't spread for all Europe. It was a very good crop because it was easy cultivated. It was easy to produce. It was easy to eat. And also potatoes are very important for human diet. Although these people on that time probably didn't know that very well. Why potatoes are very interesting from nutritional point of view? For one reason, it provides very good energy, very accessible. So this was one of the main important aspects. But the second one is, and now I will make some opposition with grains that were the basic staple of Europe until then, is that potato has, or they have, and I will show you here briefly, potato have a very interesting amounts of some vitamins that cereals don't have. So cereals, and I have here a slice of bread and one potato, just to compare. Of course, a slice of bread could not be compared with a potato because the bread is already prepared, but in terms of production. But anyway, some comparisons between cereals and potato. Potato has a very interesting amount of some vitamins, namely vitamin C. That is a vitamin that you know, that is a vitamin that is on citric fruits like orange, kiwi, and other products like that. But the main issue is that vitamin C on rigorous winter was almost impossible to ingest during European winters. And one of the biggest problems, because vegetables are not available, because we have times like that in the European winters. So fruits and vegetables were almost impossible to find during these periods. And fruits and vegetables very necessarily, because this type of vitamins were not in the cereals that were the main product eaten during these periods. So the fact that exists potatoes, it was very important to make the diet more healthy, and because scurvy was a disease that affected very much those persons during this period. As you know, scurvy, one of the problems is that you lost your teeth and you became very ill very quickly. So this was a major issue, and the question is, and is this one. Potato was easy to cultivate, it was easy to eat, it was very good from the nutritional point of view, and people were with famine. There are lots of famines across Europe during all these centuries, Some say that every 5-7 years there was a famine, a big famine, that people died because they have nothing to eat. And then you have potato that has an enormous possibility of production. It produces much more per acre than cereal. And, however, people didn't accept that for almost 200 years. So potato was not a product that people liked. And the question, why? Such a good product, why during almost 200 years in Europe no one wanted to eat potatoes? Well, some hypotheses to explain this. First of all, potato instead of maize was not considered a food of rich people, of influent people. Maize was considered the cereal of the gods. There are lots of monuments about maize all over the empires in South America, but potato never was considered a food to talk about. It was like for animals, for people, well, this may be one it's an ordinary thing. Another issue is that all the Europeans were used to use seeds and to plant seeds and to grow seeds to have energy. Rye, wheat, several types of cereals. But potato grow in tubers down of the earth, and that was not something that people reject because they want to see the flowers, they want to see the trees, they don't want to eat anything underground. And this was not considered a good product. Third, the botanists that named some of these fruits, like tomato too and potato, they call them from the family of nightshades family. So Solanaceae, and this belongs to this family, where and all the nightshades contain some amounts of alkaloids, and some of them were bad for the health of people, and people relate that with witch, with problems of that no one wants to be associated, like belladonna, another nightshade. And there was an idea that this belongs to this type of fruits of the devil, and no one wants to touch on that. Then there was idea that potatoes cause diseases, like leprosy. This was a main idea. In Naples, people were dying of hunger, and then they gave potatoes, they reject that, because they were afraid of the disease. And last but not least, bread and porridge were made of grains, and everything that goes inside were the basic food, the basic staple in energy in Europe. So no one wants to touch in another staple like potato. And even they are with Hungary, they are really starving. They didn't touch in potatoes. The staple was the food of the Christian Europe, and this was bread like Christ, and no one wants to touch in that. All of the foods in Europe were based on this type of soups, where everybody put everything there. This is an example of a type of food that was the most common food in Europe since the medieval ages. It was a pot with something there, and they put everything there. Still in Portugal, and still in Mediterranean countries, we continue to use this. Our soups are basic like this. Our cozida portuguesa is based on that. Or all of our food is based on that. Cozidos, and I'm using a Portuguese name, sopa da pedra, whatever. All of our food is based always on that. Ensopados, cataplanas, all the Portuguese food is always based on water and things inside boiling. Fish, meat, rice, everything you put here. This has a very important issue. All the nutrients stay on the water, so it was important from nutritional point of view. And another issue, very important, all the microorganisms died. So we didn't have the tradition of salads fresh food, nothing. Everything was boiled. So it prevents disease and gives you all you want. And depend of the season, you put everything from the season. So all you have around, you put here even stones, like the story. Okay, but there was one thing different that happens. Ireland, very small island in the north, were the first country to adopt potato, and this changed the history of Ireland. Ireland was the first one. Why Ireland was the first one? I have another story about Parmentier, and in France, it will be another story one day. Our pharmacist tried to influence the king to eat potato, and he could do anything. In Ireland, what was more easy. That's why they were the first. And that's why potato is still a food that the Irish consider a lot. For several reasons, I bring you some. I don't have time to talk about all of them, but first, they have rain, very important for potatoes. When it rains a lot, there is a problem with cereals, but when it rains a lot, potato plants survive. So it was very important for years of heavy rain that usually cause strong problems, big problems with plantations of cereals, but not with potato. Second one is that because of the Gulf Stream, the winter in the west parts of Ireland is very mild. And the Irish summers are also cold, are not very hot. So this moderate temperature is very good for potato. So potato arrived, it discovered a nice place to do that. Then a big issue in Europe. There was not fuel. There was not sufficient fuel at home, usually. When there was years of problem, they used wood and everything to make fire, to make fire for the houses, to have fire to cook. So the potato was very interesting because with just a small portion of water, you can boil a lot of potatoes. This was very important in times of scarcity of fuel. Another issue is that it's very easy to prepare potatoes, as you know. Just to peel them and you put them on water, it's done. Even a child could cook very well. And this is very important because children were an important part of the population on those times, and children were at home and they need to prepare their own food. And it's very easy to prepare a potato if you are a teenager. Nothing special. Just washing and boiling. I put it in Portuguese because I was writing, you run out of your taxes, then I didn't have time to explain. But just for not forget that, when the English arrived in Irish and they took place of Irish, they watch people with cereals. And when they have people with cereals, they go there and they bring the taxes. Potato, nobody knows about that because it was a bush. And they can't run from the English. So they use that. And the English were against the production of potato. That is very curious. And there are very stories about that. Last one, when the English arrived in Ireland, all the best parts of Ireland to produce meat, to produce dairy, and what that English want, they took part of that, and the Irish stay with the worst parts of the land, where potato could survive. So this is also a plant that was very necessary for them. What happens? Since potato was so good in terms of providing energy, almost big percentage of the population depend from potato very, very soon. This was very fast. And also another issue, very important issue, when you have food, you have more kids. And after many, many years of decrease of the population or stability of the population, after the introduction of potato, they double. the number of persons in Ireland, and then across Europe. So some say that potato saved Europe for starving, and until the 20th century, the increase of the population in Europe was because of the capacity to produce this staple. Well, this is maybe exaggerated, but anyway, could be interesting. They doubled the population, so everything was okay. That then came a problem. The variety of potatoes in Ireland was just one. And if in Andes you have hundreds or dozens of varieties of potato species, in Ireland just one, because that's what the Spanish bring or brought. So when a disease, a very important disease appeared, and this Lyme disease was detected in 1845, the disease, the potato blight, killed almost all the crops very, very fast. And we think that during a small period of time, more than 1 million people died because they are dependent from one culture and dependent from one species. This monoculture and this dependence create one of the worst, biggest problems in Irish society. 1 million died, and they think 1 million depart for other places. And the prime destination of these migrants was the United States. 80% of these migrants went to United States, and this changed completely the life of the United States and our history. In 1850, in New York, it was the biggest Irish city in the world with the immigrants, and 22 US presidents had Irish roots until today. So it shows the impact of the disease. So the potato made people survive, but on the other aspect, also killed many people when they became dependent. My last question was just what happened if potato didn't arrive to Europe? What would we eat today? What would be our food habits? And just one question, if this man that was from family of Irish people that went to the United States was not in '63 in the presidency, what happened with the Cuban missiles? And maybe we will not be here nowadays if maybe they had another president there. So it's a small story. Of course, there is an International Congress of Potato history. So if you like, I don't know if every year, but last year it was a Congress of Potato where this person that liked to study the potato influence, etc., joined together. Maybe they eat smashed potatoes and French fries at the end. I really don't know, but could be interesting. Some of the papers and biography that I use. There are lots of books about the history of potato. And thank you very much. Inês já sabe isso aqui. Como é que faz? Um bocadinho mais.
So good afternoon. I'd like to begin by thanking all the members of the amazing team who has been, organizing these what-ifs, especially Anna Moura, who was the first one to contact me with this invitation and who has been my bridge for saying so. So as you can already see, I will wonder about the question regarding if the Estado Novo regime and actually the Portuguese government in particular, in general, would have persisted in rejecting the apparitions of the Virgin Mary in Fátima, as it initially did. But before diving into the what if, we have first to check the what was. So I will begin in the year of 1916, when 3 children were visited 3 times by an angel that identified themselves as the Angel of Peace and the Angel of Portugal. The first visit, was when the children were taking cover from the rain, along with their flocks, in a cavern. And the second one, while they were playing in a family's well in Arneiro, as we can see represented in this sculpture. The angel asked them to pray with them and to offer sacrifice to God for the redemption of the sinners. And the third visit happened when the children were already praying. The angel appeared with the calyx and the Holy Communion, giving it to them. So this was the prelude of what we know as the apparitions of Fátima, which happened during the next year, 1917. The children were Lucia, later Sister Lucia, and her cousins, the siblings Francisco and Jacinta. At 13th of May of 1917, the trio was shepherding their family's flock in Cova-de-Iria, which belonged to Lucia's parents, when Lucia heard thunder, followed by the apparition of a lady in a holm oak. Although all 3 of the children could see her, only the girls were able to hear her, and only Lucia spoke to her. These apparitions happened at every 13th day of the next 6 months, with a notable exception that I will speak about later, until October, when the lady identified herself as the Lady of the Rosary and performed the miracle of the sun. For those of you who don't know, the sun moved in the skies before hundreds of people, both believers and non-believers. Although the children were alone during the first apparition, the word spread, and at each one, more and more people would gather to ask for redemption, miracles, or protection. It is important to recall that not only was the First Great War taking place, but Portugal was also at the turmoil of the First Republic. In short, times were unstable, and people longed for peace and reassurance. The message of Fátima, giving over those apparitions, can be very humbly summarized as: we should stop hurting God by repenting, by praying for our sins, and by offering sacrifice to God in order to convert the sinners. By doing so, peace will be achievable. However, despite its popularity, Fátima's apparitions were only considered trustworthy in October of 1930, at the eve of the Estado Novo regime, by the Bishop of Leiria, Dom José Alves Correia da Silva, and therefore only then the cult of Our Lady of Fátima was officially allowed. This didn't happen overnight. It was the result of a long canonical process tasked with the evaluation of the apparitions. Nevertheless, we can say that the cult of Our Lady of Fátima left Portugal and embraced the world. In 1948, Pope Pio XII declared the devotion to Our Lady of Fátima as admissible worldwide, and so we have, all over the world, we begin to have churches, shrines, and even hospitals and schools dedicated or devoted to the Holy Mother, as she is also referred to. This happened not only in countries with a history of Portuguese occupation, for saying so, like Mozambique, Angola, or Brazil, or with Portugal immigration, like the United States and France, but also in countries as South Korea, Hong Kong, Australia, Luxembourg, just to name a few. According to the various testimonies that we can find in the documentary Fátima e o Mundo, this is mainly due to the connection made between the Our Lady of Fátima and the idea of peace, be it during the First and Second Great Wars, civil wars, or political instability. In fact, during the Cold War, Our Lady of Fátima was seen as a symbol against the anti-clerical communism. aided by a request made years before during the apparitions by the Holy Lady for the conversion of Russia. In my opinion, it's not a coincidence that the majority of the churches dedicated to Fátima that appeared in the United States happened between 2048 and 2050, when the Cold War was at its best, for saying so. Nowadays, we have more than 10,000 references worldwide to the cult of Our Lady of Fátima. It's also represented and interpreted in the arts with movies, books, statues, and cultures, and paintings. Sorry. In 2012, Franciscan Jacinta, who died from the pneumonic plague in 1919 and 1920, respectively, are canonized by Pope Francis, while the beatification of Sister Lucia, deceased in 2005, is still in process. Nowadays, Fátima has, of course, one of the biggest sanctuaries dedicated to Mary, visited by thousands of both pilgrims and tourists every year, and with a channel which is constantly screening the chapel to the rest of the world. Now, with this context in mind, I would like to ask you to come back with me to 1917, when the apparitions were taking place. Lucia was 10 years old, while Francisco was, Lucia was 10 years old, I got it right, while Francisco was 9 and Jacinta 7. Despite the crowds who believed them and who constantly harassed them for answers and prayers, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. So many neighbors were convinced that the tree was lying for attention, and this included Lucia's own mother, who was a very pious woman, and couldn't bear the idea that her own daughter was lying and deceiving so many people. Therefore, a relationship which, according to Lucia, had been amorous became very, very much harder. So it was became a difficult relationship, with Lucia's mother and sisters mocking, insulting her, and even hitting her in order to force her to deny her visions and tell the truth. The priest itself, Father Manuel Marques Pereira, was also not a believer at first, raising the possibility of Lucia having been deceived by the devil, an idea that scared Lucia so much that she doubted her visions, and if not for Franciscan Jacinta, she would probably miss the apparition of the 13th of July. In fact, she only went due to a last-minute impulse. What wasn't also helpful was that the fact that it became impossible to plant anything at Cova da Iria due to the amount of people always stepping on the land. And the family also had to sell the flock because there was always a great amount of people arriving who wanted to speak with Lucia, making it impossible for her to shepherd the flock. And those were the main means of subsistence of the family, which naturally affected how they dealt with all this situation. So the shepherds and Lucia in Portugal, in particular, were under a great pressure from their families and from the church representatives to deny what they have seen. Furthermore, the ever-growing number of pilgrims was getting the attention of the First Republic, which considered the people's religion as far too much and based on superstition. The newspaper O Século was the first one to cover the apparitions in a skeptical article, which raised the possibility of being a decoy of financial speculation related with the possible finding of mineral waters that, of course, could be capitalized. The media wasn't, therefore, very much convinced, although this changed afterwards, not completely. Some newspapers like A Ordem, which was a Catholic newspaper, was very anti-Fátima, for saying so. But, for instance, O Século, the same journalist that wrote this article, changed his views afterwards. I won't say that he became a believer, but he was definitely more open-minded to it. The greatest opposition, however, came from the government. Not only were Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta constantly submitted to inquiries, to the point that the children decided to offer these ordeals as sacrifice to God for the redemption of the sinners, But the authorities also destroyed an ark made of wood and lanterns made by the population and tried to cut down the home oak. It just failed on doing so because they cut the wrong one. So they failed because of that. More than that, at the 13th of May of 2020, happened the death of Jacinta. The cavalry prevented the population to go to Covadaria and stopped Lucia from doing the same by escorting her home while joking about cutting her head off. Now, for us, it seems like they were obvious messing with her, but we must remember that we are dealing with a child that must be, by this time, 11 or 12 years old. We could say that the Republic's biggest attempt to interfere with the cult, however, was still in 1917. In August of that year, the governor, Arturo Oliveira Santos, summoned the three shepherds to Vila Nova de Orem, while Francisco and Jacinta's father appears in their place, being reprimanded for that, but using as their young age and the duration of the journey as an excuse. Lucia's father decides to accompany his daughter, but still takes her, declaring that if she was the one claiming to have the visions, she should be the one doing the talk. The governor tries to persuade Lucia to tell him the secret entrusted to her by the lady and to make her promise not to return to Covadaria. When Lucia refuses these requests, the governor resorts to both promises and threats, including to her own life, without any success. On the 13th of September, Lucia, Francisco and Jacinta are once again summoned by the governor, who, after a fruitless interrogation, deceives both the children and their families, with promising them a ride in his automobile to Covadaria. Instead, he takes the children to the prison of Orem, where they are once again interrogated, threatened about being fried alive, and prevented from seeing their families. Later on, the governor would declare that his only intention was to have a psychiatric evaluation of the children. Despite their situation, the emotion that prevails among the children is sadness for not being able to keep their promise to the lady and to go to Covadaria. They then pray, and their behavior is an influence on other prisoners. Upon their release, the children, the lady appears to them on the 19th at Valinhos, which were the fields between their houses and Covadaria. This was the fourth apparition and the exception I mentioned before. And now I raise the question, what if the shepherds, Lucia in particular, had given in to the pressures they were under and denied their visions? Moreover, what if the government, be it the First Republic or later the Estado Novo, had kept on denying the apparitions' credibility and instead of accepting and formalizing them? My first thought goes to popular pressure. Although there were some sectors that were very much against it and took actions, the majority of the people were actually embraced Fátima with all their hearts, we can say. The constant flux of pilgrims and believers looking for miracles and answers to their prayers is referred multiple times, both in Sister Lucia's memoir and in documentation of the time, from letters written by those pilgrims themselves to their families, to newspapers and registrations of the inquiries. The wood ark mentioned above, destroyed by the authorities, was built by these people. They would give, among other mundane things, letters to Lucia, in the hope that she would give them to the lady. Usually the answer to those will be something in the lines, I have no place for those in heaven, since those were material things. Moreover, despite the issues the priests faced in raising money for the local church, people will leave money at the home oak, enough, following the lady's instructions, to build 2 stands in honor of Our Lady of Rosary and to begin a chapel. In fact, the little chapel built in 1918 in the site was built by the people and not by the religion sectors, for saying. Having this knowledge and adding how easily the cult of Fátima spread throughout the world, One must consider the hypothesis that little would have changed with or without the Portuguese government's approval. It might, however, not turn out to be such a big cult, being closer to the ones we see in France, in Our Lady of La Salette Sanctuary, also based in the apparition of Our Lady to 2 children in the year of 1846, and Our Lady of Lourdes, known for its healing waters, and also based in the apparition of Our Lady to a 14-year-old shepherd named Bernadette, who is now Saint Bernadette. Or even something closer to the Lapa Sanctuary in Sinarcelho, here in Portugal, which was built in 1498, in the site where, according to the legend, a shepherd named Joanna found the same image of the Our Lady that we still have in the cavern. The miraculous thing about Lapa is not so much an actual apparition, but that these statues spoke for saying so to the shepherd Joanna, instructing her to build a sanctuary in the very cavern she was found. People weren't very eager to do so because it wasn't a very accessible place, but every time they tried to build it somewhere else, the statue will disappear and reappear at the cavern. Another possibility would be, yes, I thought I was going ahead on myself, but no, I'm on the right path, sorry. Another possibility will be oblivion. If the shepherds, Lucy in particular, since she was considered the ringleader, had denied their visions and admitted to a lie, the most probably outcome will be that we will have now the decoy of Fátima, a footnote in history. We can only imagine the many possibilities of that. But let's say that without the wonder at the reinforcement of faith that the apparitions brought with them, the anti-clerical trait of the First Republic might have prevailed, and when the Estado Novo was implemented, religion, which was one of its main pillars, won't be already such a force among the Portuguese people. We can speculate that laws like the ones that allow divorce, for instance, would have an earlier implementation and acceptance. We can ask ourselves if the woman's role as mainly a mother, submissive to her husband, would have been a view broken earlier, since both these issues were very much influenced by religion and what was considered a good pious woman. Or maybe not. After all, the First Republic was a letdown for Portuguese feminists who were expecting issues such as these, along with the women's vote, would have been considered when the country's regime changes from a monarchy to a republic. Sadly, that didn't happen. The one thing we can be sure of is that we won't have our free F sayings, or free F saying, football, Fado and Fátima, at least not with these exact words. So thank you so much for your attention. Okay. So who wants to begin?
Okay, you are here. So, they asked now for us to talk a little about these issues between us, but I think we can start and then open. Okay.
May I?
Please.
Is this one not?
No, we...
Well, I have one that there is one thing that you spoke that as a writer it caught my immediate attention, which was the toxic potatoes. I had no idea that such thing existed, and my mind went right away to Agatha Christie novel. So, do you think that it will be possible to write a thriller, a novel, in which the killer used a toxic potato as a weapon, or is that way too far-fetched? Too far-fetched, yes. Like the victim will notice a difference in taste, or toxic potatoes or not don't go that far.
That's a very interesting question. Thank you very much for that. I think this has happened all over the history, that people killed others with poisoning food. Some we know by historical facts, others we don't know. And the most interesting aspect of poisoning in food is sometimes they are indetectable. And that's what it's really amazing. For example, with mushrooms, we have several mushrooms. All of them are very tasty. And even those that are very poison are still tasty. And that's why it caused many deaths for every year in every place, because they are apparently comestible and we eat them. With potato, we know that this is always a little bitter, but another interesting aspect is that some people react more to others, to this poison. So it may kill some, but not others. And this would be very interesting for a novel, because if someone knows who's more capable to survive, they can kill just one person and keep the others alive, and nobody will know about that, because some will be a little ingest, but one will die, those that we wanted to do. And in history, just to finish, because the story of poison is much amazing, and I think everyone wants to talk about that or read about that. Some kings killed their enemies, and they start thinking about how they will kill them with food, and sometimes not only with poison, but also with intoxication, for example, of alcohol. One of the Russian Tsar killed in this very interesting aspect. He defined someone who don't drink too much every day, but you want to kill him. And what he decided to make a contest of strong alcohol, like vodka. But before he start the contest, he drink a huge quantity, a huge amount of fat, like goat fat, like cheese and things like that, so that his stomach is provided with this enormous quantity of fat that will delay the entry of the alcohol in the body. Then he start the contest, and the other guy, he didn't eat anything during almost 1 day, because he have a lot of things and keep him out of food. He was very angry and started to drink vodka, and then he drink one, the other must continue. And they say that he killed many of his opponents with this contest of vodka. So there are many ways of killing people by food. And the other side is that there are lots of ways of preventing people be killed by food. We're talking about this. Our Bible, and all the holy papers on that, books on that, always have strict rules for preventing people from dying of food. That's why these holy books have a lot of comments and a lot of lines about what to eat and not to eat, maybe to prevent people from dying from food.
I'm calling dibs on the idea, by the way.
Then I can make a question, not so interesting question, but anyway, a question about this history on religion, fado, and football, and Fátima is always on that. And you can, maybe you have several reasons for that. It's the amazing interest of Fátima all over the world. That is completely, I've been traveling for the most amazing and far away from everything place in the world, and I always see Fátima. From Indonesia to Chile to Peru, always Fátima everywhere. Why this, and there are lots of saints all over the world. Why this completely devotion to a woman, to this person, when there are so many persons that we can adore? Do you have any explanation for that? That for me it's fascinating. I'm in the small corner of an Indonesian place that is not a Catholic place, and then Fátima, the symbol, the statue of Fátima, small one, in the corner. Why this?
So the commentary that I mentioned, and which is available at RTP Play, Fátima e o Mundo, actually is a little bit about that. And
Okay,
as
great.
I said, people connect very much Fátima with peace, which is something everyone wants and needs. And they also connect her a lot with children. So there are many mothers around the world that when the child is sick, they turn to Our Lady of Fátima, because all Our Ladies are mothers, but the Lady of Fátima, because she appeared to 3 little children, and 2 of them died very young, so they are children forever. So they always connect her, the connection between Lady and Fátima and motherhood is even stronger. And then we have Pope Pio XII. He was very, very much devoted to our Fátima. In fact, he was very sick for a while. We know the doctors thought he wouldn't recover, and he couldn't leave his room. And for some reason, they decided, since he was so devoted to Fátima, let's take the pilgrimage. There are two main statues, one that is always in Fátima, and another one that does a pilgrimage around the world. So they took that one, they put her in an helicopter, and he threw the helicopter around. And after that, his health was very much improved. So he survived, and he was already very dedicated to Our Lady of Fátima. He became even more. So he was a great force in developing that faith. But the main issue, I will say, it was really because the Our Lady of Fátima is the one that people connect more with peace and with children.
Very interesting. Yeah, can open the question.
I still have one question about the potatoes. No, because you spoke about how the climate in Ireland was very favorable to the plantation of potatoes. And I went right away to the climate crisis that we are facing nowadays. Could that be also a new turning point in the potato history? I mean, in a moment where we are so dependent of it. I mean, half of the Portuguese codfish plates will disappear without a potato. One of our favorite snacks are potato chips. So could the climate craze be of such a big important challenge for the potato history, for saying so?
Well, I don't know, but very quickly, an answer is that what happened in Ireland. The Incas and the people from the Andes, they have hundreds of varieties of potato. Some were suitable for high altitudes, others for lowlands, others need more water, others need less water, and they plant these varieties of potato depending with the places where they are. This is the biodiversity and how ancient people use biodiversity to adapt and to survive for different types of climate. The problem is that the potato, the tubers, they can spread from one other. And when it arrived, the Spanish bring just one or two, and then the genetic, because there are some experience, they define those that create more amounts, the big potatoes, and this is the one that today is planted everywhere. And this is, for me, this is the big problem. For example, we have one company, for example, that sells more potato than all the companies. And this one is a fast food chain. okay? This fast food chain, they need the same type of potato to fry it in the same way in all of the thousands restaurants in the world. So they buy just one variety of potato that is planted in the same way, in the same place. To have this quality, because it's very interesting, because quality is an enemy of many things. We like the word quality because we assume that quality is good. I would say that in terms of food quality, in some way, is bad. Because quality means the same thing everywhere, so that people have the same satisfaction and pleasure every time. So this is the idea of quality, the same pleasure in every place. And to have this quality, the companies buy always the same type of potato that needs the same quantity of water, etc., etc., etc. And this, for me, is the biggest enemy of our problems in the future, because we just, and more, these companies, to have the same quality, they decide not to buy potatoes to others, but to farm their own potatoes. So the big farmers in the world in this moment are a few companies that buy the same type of cows, the same type of potatoes, and the same type of lettuce, because the sandwich should have the same type of lettuce. So this, for me, is the biggest problem of the environment, not the fact that potato would receive, because there are potatoes very well adapted to the more desertic places in the world. Maybe I answered the question. I don't know, but...
I think it is. I mean,
okay.
It's not the climate change so much, it's more capitalism.
brain change, yes.
Well, I'm going to open to the public if anyone has questions, or I will move on with questions. Wait.
So I have two questions, one for each of our speakers, because I can pick. I loved both presentations so much, but I'll start with the potatoes. You said something that I found very, very interesting, which was the idea that the potato failed to catch on in Europe for around 200 years, I think.
Yeah.
Is there any food right now that you feel is failing to catch on that would be interesting from a nutritional perspective, from a climate perspective, that just doesn't seem to catch on for any reason?
Yeah. Very, very interesting questions, updated to our days. I will not use all the planet, but in Portugal, right now. I would say that chickpeas is a good example of a food that could be an answer for many of our problems, and it decreased every year in our plates. It's amazing, because it's a huge provider of protein, high quality protein. It gives the soil a lot of nutrients, not only capture, but gives the soil lots of nutrients. Is a source that when you eat more of that, you can eat less animal protein. So, and it was amazing because it was eaten often in the past and then decreased our consumption. So I can say chickpeas among others, but it's a good example of a food that everyone should eat. And even our food wheel, our recommendations of Directorate General Health and others say that you should eat every day a small portion of chickpeas. And the Portuguese families maybe spend sometimes weeks without eating chickpeas and other beans. So this is a good example of something that is in front of our eyes, but for other reasons. I would say in the past more religion reasons, nowadays commercial reasons. We are eating other different sources of protein. Sometimes soya and other products that are like a milagros came from devastating the forest of Amazon and other places, and instead we have here very good source of local indigenous proteins that no one wants to pick. this is crazy. Someday some person who came from Mars or I don't know where would arrive at Earth and say, why, if you have that, why are you doing other things? You are not intelligent, but it's what it is.
I love that answer so much. Thank you. I expected a really exotic answer, and I got chickpeas, so I know what I'll be having for dinner tonight. Thank you very much. Now to the issue of religion. You said something about the First Republic, which I thought it made me think of how this was probably the worst time in Portuguese history for someone to have a vision and for someone to, I'm not going to say for someone to start a cult, because the children were not consciously trying to start anything. They were visited by this opportunity, if you will. But that made me think of how challenging it must have been for them as individuals, but that's not my question. My question has to do with, I feel, the gendered aspect of this cult. So obviously we're talking about a vision of a woman, Our Lady of Fátima. We are talking about 3 children, 2 of whom are girls at that time. Only Irma Lucia actually makes it to adulthood, so for many years she is she's the voice of this movement, of this cult. And I feel, but this is obviously just personal experience, that women are very attached to the idea of Our Lady of Fátima. Do you feel like the cult is gendered? Not so much. Do you feel like this is important? The fact that women are so heavily involved at the beginning of this cult, is this something that we still see today?
How to say that?
That was a very big question, I'm sorry.
No, in general, women are, even if you go to church nowadays and you see, of course, you have the main figure is a man, is a priest, bishops, the Pope, all men. But the majority of people that you see in churches or even helping the church with chores are women. So in Portugal, the majority of religious people actually doing something to help the church are women. And that is not new. That has been I won't say from the beginning of times, because the apostles were all men. But for a long, long time, women are much more related to religion than men. And I think that's also because they were expected to be more pious, to be more forgivable, yes, and all the things that religions say it's a good trait in women. So women should be more charitable, so should be more concerned about the poor people, and you almost expect women to be in charge of helping others in a social and charitable way than you expect a man. And that might have influenced the amount of people who are now related with this cult in particular, and with the Catholic religion in general. As for the apparition itself, the majority of the apparitions are from Our Lady, and I think it's also because people feel more connected to her. Like people feel more comfortable when they want to ask something to an entity above, God in this place. They prefer to ask to the Virgin Mary to interfere in their favor than to ask directly to God, because they feel like they are closer to her. Like she was a woman that we know that existed, and people feel like being a woman, she will have more empathy, she will have more compassion, and she is seen as the mother or all of us. So someone who will treat us like their children, like her children. And I will say it will be related to that at least.
Thank you very much.
We have time for either 2 very short answers and questions or 1 question. If anyone wants. I have not necessarily a question, but rather a challenge. Because Professor Graça, Pedro Graça and Dr. Inês, both in their own context of this presentation, talk about how details are able to influence heavily on the history and the culture of the people of Europe and Portugal, and then of the world, the spread of the Holy Mary cult. Okay. And you see, one of the reasons that you mentioned for potato not have been initially so welcome in Europe was that it was not the food of gods. That maize was the food of gods, but potato was for the commoners, for the animals. And we had, relating with codfish that Inês already mentioned, it comes heavily from the time of the Estado Novo also. Our habit of codfish and potatoes at Christmas is come to that. So, my question is, how did Fátima affect the nutritional history of Portugal? Does it exist? Are there any points? Because if you are starting at a time when codfish permeated, and you mentioned very well that potato is essential for many of the codfish plates, do they cross somewhere?
Yeah, this is
It
good.
was a challenge. You don't have to answer now, but...
May I start? This is quick. I know we are running out of time. We don't have time to that. But what is the most amazing thing is, first of all, talking about fish. There is an idea that we eat a lot of fish. It's true. Portugal now is the heaviest consumer of fish per capita, one of the heaviest in the world. And you say, wow, we have a huge coast, that's the reason. But if you come back 100 years ago, during Fátima appearance, fish was not a food that everyone eat. Not at all. Why? Because when you go for the interior, 40 kilometers, the fish collapse. So no one, and the majority of the population was in the interior, not in the littoral. So no one eat fish. No one, well, salty fish, but the consumption of fish was residual in the inlands. Even sardines that we talk today, sardines have a lot of fat. Imagine the fat when it starts to be broken and the smell of the fat. No one eats sardines. This is a tale. So only a small portion of the population across this area eat fish every day, or almost like today, 2-3 times a week. No one eats fish. So fish was not possible on this time, on time of Fátima in the interior. Then all the Europe started to freeze because the Industrial Revolution took across Europe, except in the southern countries where the Industrial Revolution didn't arrive. So we didn't have the capacity to have fish. But Estado Novo wants to tell a tale that we are fish eaters, we are very proud of our mans, we navigate in caravelas, and now we navigate to the whole world to catch the fish, and they create this one with heavy problems with our population, because it was not, it's a catch that it creates a lot of people died of that. We can have sardines in the coast. Why do we go to catch cod so many kilometers away? But the most amazing thing, at 100 later, we still catch cod. That is the less sustainable fish to eat by a Portuguese. And although all the documentation about changing climate that should say Portuguese should not eat cod by 2 reasons, it's not sustainable, it was a lot of salt, and we died of excessive consumption of sod. But if I say that in public, I will be crucified. Because no one can talk about cod. And nowadays, just to finish, yesterday I went to downtown in Porto, and amazing codfish everywhere. And you know why? Because 9% of the people that visit us today are Spanish or Brazilian. And imagine what they want when they arrive to a Portuguese restaurant: codfish. So even I nutritionists say reduce cod, prefer sardines, prefer other fish from our coasts. Nobody listened to me. Why? Because tourism makes the city alive. And the restaurants are full of people that want to eat cod. So let's have cod as main basic food in all the restaurants of Porto. Imagine how the history is. Always keeping changing and changing things.
Well, so as for me, honestly, regarding food, the only thing that comes to mind is that one of the sacrifices that the free shepherds would offer to God was they would spend days without eating, giving their amount of food to others in necessity. But I had no idea if it was potato or something else. So.
Well, we are about to conclude our second day keynote speaks, and I just want to make a shout out because today is a very special day, because 69 years ago, in the 23rd of November of 1944, at this faculty, we had the first female PhD. So it's an anniversary today that we are also celebrating. And with this happy note, I believe, I thank you all for your presence. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bom efeméride. Muito bom efeméride. Ok. Foi?
Eu tive as ideias. Ela não foi comunicada nos livros. Eu também.
Foi um prazer. Então, olha, mas aquelas ideias que nós falamos, se quiserem pensar um bocado em alguma coisa nesta área, pensar numa história e fazer alguma coisa, alguma coisa.